All right. Episode 2 of Before You Build. My name's Austin.
And my name's Jason.
Okay, Jason is one of our PMs here at Mana Construction Company, and I kind of put him on the spot because I wanted your real and authentic answers. So I'm excited about you being part of what we're doing.
Sure.
Okay, so tell me, give me some of your experience as a PM, or even just as in construction building.
Sure. Well, I got started as a handyman and basically worked my way up. So at all phases of hands-on foreman work, superintending out in the field, and then finally landing as a project manager and overseeing projects from the office. So,
what has been your favorite?
Well,
step along the way.
Each season that I was in, I really enjoyed it. But maybe as I've gotten older and I've learned the project managing, this is definitely my favorite part of it. I get to do all the planning up front and account for all the things along the way. So I really have come to enjoy project managing.
Yeah, I feel like one of your strengths is the organization piece of it. Like you can really you dive in and you create systems to keep us more organized, and I can see that. But what you were also as a superintendent, very organized and clean and always delivered like a really great project. So that was definitely there before you were in the office.
Yeah, I guess that was all like analog and this is all digital because now everything's organized on the computer and all that. But in the field, it's like you got tools on, you got plans out. So did my best to be organized back then, but it was more like, I don't know, at a higher level when you're in the office. And
yeah. I remember your reputation was like you used to hand off a build like with barely any punch list.
I prided myself in that.
You did. And what did you do? I have 2 questions. Remind me to come back to the rope at Westminster.
Oh, yeah.
But what was your mindset, to deliver that?
I wanted, so the person coming to check off these projects, she was notorious for just putting blue tape on everything. And when I got started, I was fixing all those blue tapes for other superintendents. So when I became a superintendent, it was always my goal that when she would come in, there would be nothing to put tape on, that she would just be blown away. I got down to 5. That was like there was only 5 pieces of tape and I got it all done before she left. I never got down to 0. I became a project manager. But my goal in going in there was to have it absolutely perfect to where I already accounted for everything that I knew that she was going to look for before she even got there. So.
What were some of those things that, now to set the context a little bit, this is an operator, a high level operator that's coming in to look at a completed restaurant at turnover from construction to the owner or the owner rep, and in this case, like the operations team. And you were able to learn and anticipate, what those items were. What were those items that this person in this example were looking for? Or like, what were you, eventually, looking at to prepare for her?
They were all basically personal preference items. None of them were like, okay, you need to do this to meet code type of thing. And they were all off plan. One example would be, the top line of the cove base that's underneath the cabinet that no one ever sees. It's only about that much space between the bottom of the cabinet and the top of that cove base. By code, it just gets installed, it's fine, but she wanted that top line, grouted. Or, little things like that in the back of house, any type of little gap in the FRP, just make sure you caulk that with white, caulking. And she had a very keen eye for things, aesthetically, just wanted everything to look as nice as possible. And on the plans, it's just, you build the plan. So that really gave me the experience of trying to put myself in the place of, the customer. What do they want? It's not about just building what the plans tell you to build it the way that they want to see it. And it's almost impossible to put everything on paper. So in having conversations with the customers and kind of seeing their vision, it helps you really bring, I feel, the project to life. So.
Yeah, and I think that someone like you, right, you have the right heart, which is why you continue to get, more opportunity. But what you're doing in those conversations is you're really like beginning you're going the extra mile. And I think that's really what it takes to, not only be like a great general contractor, but it also is like what it looks like to set someone else up for success. And, it is in those small details that really matter for those operators, right? Like, caulking a small area in the back of house, could be a long-term, issue for them. And they're already thinking like, hey, I don't want to have water in this particular area, or I don't want to have a safety issue here for my associates. And, there's all these little things that they're thinking down the line, which has given us a really cool perspective on construction, because we've learned to appreciate what those things are and notice what those things are. And I feel like it's not something you can, you can't make it up. You have to like have lived it and seen it yourself. But I always, it's fun to see a superintendent that leaves little blue tape. And I'm not going to talk about the alternative, but I remember one. This was more of like, I guess, I don't know, it's probably not funny to you, but there was a design feature in one of our cafes that I don't know. There was a pole in the middle of
a structural beam. Yeah, it was a round pole.
Yeah,
ugly because it's just steel beam.
And so we were, it was right in the middle of the dining room, and I think there was supposed to be like a fireplace or something to like kind of church it up, but that never made it in. And I'm not sure whose idea. I think it was the designer. The designer's idea said, "Well, why don't you just put some rope around it?" And we're like, "Okay, like we'll do that." But this is like a perfect example. Like, who is going to do that? So you did it.
I did it.
How long did that take you?
Probably 3 days.
Oh my God.
In between supering and all that, you got to get your hot glue gun, industrial, and I had to start, at the bottom and work my way up to the top so that I could keep it tight. And it's just little by little, just gluing all the way around. I had done, similar work for you guys, but it was only like maybe this much of a section. This was a, 15-foot pole. And it was just going around and around and around. I remember when you came, you're like, "Oh, that looks great." And I was like, "It better," because there's a lot of burnt fingers in that one.
Well, and I think it's like a perfect example of like, there's all these different decision makers along the way that impact construction. And we rarely think about how construction can impact, the other, I don't know, parties. Like, I think that like intuitively we're like, oh, okay, here, construction, this is what you just do. And, we do it, we figure it out, and, we go and do it. But it's an interesting perspective to think of it like, what can we offer to the project that's more than just simply building, right? But like, how do we set people up to be in facilities that they can afford long-term? How do we get owners to think about their buildings as part of the model and not just secondary to the model, right? Like, you're not just selling food, like you're responsible for this building and for what it looks like and how it, functions internally, or if it's a retail space, the layout of the shop. It's not just like what it looks like. And it's important how big your space is and how, what you settle for in terms of the rent number that you're in. And so all these things that, we learn from construction, I think ends up being important to consider as well. So I was curious your thoughts on, what you would say, matters, or, your perspective on, this conversation of like, before you build, like, what are the things that from someone who is an expert in construction, grew up through being a laborer, handyman, superintendent, now as a PM, what would you add to this conversation? Obviously, knowing I just put you on the spot and you had no time to think about it.
Well, because it's the pre-construction phase and what goes in before the project, it's just trying to, first, like Richard always says, build it in your head. And then based on your experience, trying to account for every single phase, every single detail. With the experience, what it's going to take to get from A to Z. But oftentimes, the plans, they'll be missing certain things. So I really rely heavily on looking at all those little spots on the plans and trying to build it in my head and go, okay, is this accounted for? Is this accounted for? At our company, the project managers estimate it. So I really have total control from start to finish, making sure that We're not going to have change orders at the end of the job because something wasn't accounted for in the beginning. Now, there's always going to be unforeseens, but we really, as owners in most cases, we try to limit those because we don't get to go to anybody else on those change orders. We have to eat those costs. So that's really trained me to try to make sure that everything gets accounted for in the beginning so that as the project goes, when everything goes smoothly, there are like no change orders at the end because we did the due diligence at the start. So
Yeah, I think that's really crucial. I mean, it's really it's kind of a fun. I mean, I don't know if you think it's fun, but I think it's a cool tactical thing that we do, that we have the PMs estimate, because you have to be deeply involved in the plans. You have to see, exactly what's going on, which gives you better, ability to control the project once you get into it. And a lot of the times as a PM, at least in how we work it, is like, we make you responsible for those superintendents. And if things don't start going the way that we want, you're the first person in line to go fix it. And so, which is why you're involved in hiring the superintendents as well. But I think it's understated in the fact that, you're looking at the details, you're thinking very much about what the end product's going to be for an owner. And you're taking that same meticulous care that you had for a punch list or for the rope, and you're applying it to the pre-construction phase so that so we can, set up the owner for success long term. And I think that's just, it's the value is incredible there. Especially because why should we care? It's as a general contractor, you're given a set of plans, and you should, theoretically, you're responsible for just building what's on those plans. And obviously, a lot of GCs will, make sure that, they're advising at some level, but I really feel like we go over the top with that to set people up.
Well, definitely. I mean, when we work with subs, that's oftentimes their favorite, excuse of going like, oh, well, this is how it is on the plan. So in estimating, I really make sure that we get it in the contracts, that these things are accounted for, so that, later on they can't go, oh, well, this is what the plan said. It's like, here's what the contract says.
Totally.
You've agreed to it. So
what is the most significant lesson you've learned being a PM as it relates to, just setting up your projects for success?
I mean, there's so many valuable. The most valuable, I don't know if it's number one, but it's definitely up there, is just taking the time in the beginning to thoroughly look at all the details of the plans, all the boring little lines, all the detailed pictures, anything that doesn't make sense. You're just, meticulously categorize, at least I do, making categories of questions, anything that's unclear. Don't make any assumptions. You're not going to catch everything because none of us are perfect, but when you go about it with the intentions, I'm trying to read every single line of these plans and understand it. If I don't, I'm creating an RFI before we even start the project, before I even turn my final bid in. That's helped me to really get full, coverage on all the details of a plan. And sometimes you're going down these rapid trails and you're asking one question that sparks a question in one of your consultants, and you can discover something potentially that would have been, several hundreds of, tens of thousands of dollars, I'll say, change order on the back end. I like catching those things up in the front because I feel like we're not trying to take advantage of anyone. We're trying to, show them full transparency. This is what the project's going to take. These are all the costs. We're not trying to hide anything. So I feel like that's how I'm judged. That's my report card is, how well did you do in the beginning to look at all this stuff compared to what was discovered along the way. And the closer I can bring those together, I feel like, there's my A, there's my report card. So
yeah, that's I love, there's so many follow-up questions I could go. I'm going to try to keep it in this one specific lane. I think, I'm curious your thoughts on what is, so when we get into actual construction, do you think there's more consequence that happens in the decisions before construction or while we're building? What's, to me, and I'm just, maybe you can fill in the gaps here or kind of, summarize my thoughts or give me your own perspective on this, but the construction itself is always going to be, challenging. There's going to be challenges. There's going to be, it's construction. There's going to be stuff that comes out. There's going to be things that we didn't see. It's just like the nature of construction. There's going to be things that happen, and they happen. Unforeseen things with subs. Maybe plans that were interpreted one way or the other. City problems, weather, whatever it is. There's always that kind of stuff. But do you feel like if you could weigh it, does the success of the project, is it more important once you're in construction or before, like while you're setting it up and making decisions before you build?
Before.
And why is that in your mind?
Then you have options. As Richard says, once the project starts, you're pregnant. Like it limits the amount of options that you actually have. In the beginning, when you're in the planning stages, before any of the foundation's been poured, before the shovels even hit the ground, when you see problems or we'll say challenges, you have a lot more options on how you want to tackle that. You have a lot more leverage with your subs in negotiating better prices for that. Unfortunately, once you've started the project, you've already committed to finishing this by a certain date. Sometimes the costs that come from these unforeseens, you don't have any leverage to go back to the sub because they know, like, come on, you got to do this. So they charge you higher than they did in the beginning, and time constraints. Sometimes you're paying a premium to get things that maybe if you had the luxury of time, you could have not paid that premium. So, gosh, yeah, maybe like 90% really is all goes into the planning and like the pre-construction phase.
Yeah, I think that's maybe one of the things that was eye-opening to me. Like I always thought the building was like the hardest part, which like the actual building is incredible when you see it, right? Like when you come to a piece of land and you watch it transform into like a building, it's very rewarding. And obviously along the way there's challenges, like I said. But I guess I underestimated how much time and effort and organization and consequence happens before you even start. Now, obviously, like intuitively, I think we all know that there's going to be a lot of planning for something as sophisticated as building. But really the emphasis and energy tends to come towards the actual building, right? Like people, they're pressing you on time, they're pressing you on budget, they're pressing you on while the store is being built because, all the action's happening, right? Like you've broken ground, like you can be physically there, you can watch it happen, you can be a part of the, this guy didn't show up today and blah, 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 blah. But really like the where everything's at stake, like where the consequences is like before in the office. And, that's not to downplay how important it is that you have like a, very skilled tradesman who can work with the hands and not to like elevate the office. But the point is like, there is so much of, what is important and long-term, what's going to make the impact prior to the build. And this, like we have chosen to spend more money once we've, I guess at any point of the project to set us up for the next 20 years versus being like short-sighted. Like we'll spend more money on a budget, for example, just so that we can, ensure that 5-10 years from now, the building's in the right spot. And I think it just changes, like when you have a long-term ownership perspective, it changes, how you think about the construction process. And I think it brings a lot of your time and energy to before the build. So yeah, well, the other, this is like, kind of turning into maybe like a PM perspective on before your build. How important would you say it is, like having the experience in the field before you were a PM? Like how valuable is that for you?
I mean, for the way that I project manage it, I didn't go to school to be a project manager, so it's essential there. For me, I would not be able to function as a PM unless I had the experience of seeing it hands-on, seeing a project from start to finish, and have the experience of seeing kind of where mistakes were made by other people, things that were missed, not accounted for, so that in my role, I know to look for those things and account for them.
What's like one thing you would say, like a tip for someone who's like, a construction manager or someone who's up and coming who doesn't have the same experience that you might have? Like, what is, not saying that, some construction managers will have, some superintendent work, prior, but a lot of times, there's certain roles we interact with that have less experience in the field. What's like a tip you would give someone like that? Like, how can you help someone like that if they're in their journey of becoming like a PM and they want to be a PM?
Find experts that you can trust, that you can go to ask those questions, that maybe someone like me can rely on experience, but there's people with that experience. So really trying to get a good circle around you of people that you can trust, that you can go to ask, hey, how is this normally done? Or, what's the process, from A to Z for this particular, I don't know, we'll say build, so that when you're going to build your project, you have maybe not your own experience, but an expert's experience to refer to, and never be afraid or embarrassed to ask, or like, I don't know this or whatever. I'm always peppering our architects and our consultants for things because they're experts in their one field. Like Richard always says, like they have one job, right? As a PM, you have to wear a lot of hats and you have to have a whole, grasp over the whole job. So if you don't understand something, make sure that you talk to the right person that'll explain it to you in the way that you can understand it, because if you skip over that, it's just going to bite you in the end.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I appreciate your time and speaking into this, and I look forward to more conversations with you and putting you out there to see, more of you and what you bring to our team. So,
Thanks, man.
Thanks, man.
Yeah.
Appreciate you.